video, I want to explore how pros play chords on guitar versus how beginners tend to play chords. Now we're going to be working up to the sequence that I just demoed there, which is a riff on Waiting on the World to Change by John Mayer. But I also want to open this out so that you can apply the things we look at here to any chord you ever play on guitar. So we're going to look at 5 key points, and the first point applies to absolutely everyone no matter your level, and it's that we often press down too hard. So whenever we play any chord, say it's the D major, which is perhaps one of the first chords you'll ever play on guitar, what we want to do is press down at your side of the fret area, which would be here, as opposed to in the middle. If you're in the middle, you have to press down far too hard, and that positioning really makes a difference. And if you don't press down really, really hard, the notes probably won't ring out in the middle, but if we're at this side of the fret, you can press down a lot lighter, and if we're pressing down lighter, we relax more, everything sounds better, and you can have quicker chord changes and just do a lot more stuff. With the D chord and with most open chords, it does make sense for our fingers to be on this angle, which is something we're going to look at when we look at lead guitar playing as well in this series. But for each of these fingers, they want to be right on the tips, curling over the tips, on an angle facing kind of your strumming hand shoulder. We'll talk about the thumb over the top in a second. And then pressing down as lightly as possible. Like, try it yourself. Just press down as lightly as possible while the note just stops ringing out, and then just a shade more than that. And that is how hard you want to press down, both on open chords and indeed bar chords. When it comes to barring and holding down this first finger, people tend to, even though they might be an intermediate player, they go back to beginner habits of really pressing down as much as they can, and it's not needed. You want to press down as lightly as you can, but the positioning with a bar chord, elbow into the side, which puts us on the inside of that first finger, and that for a D chord, for example, however you play it, will enable a good sound with all the strings you want ringing out, and sounding great without you applying half as much pressure as we tend to do. My second point is about practicing these chord changes and the fact that you don't even have to be pressing down at all to practice chords. So what you'll often find when you're practicing chords is you'll get lines on your fingers. You get big lines, and even I've got some lines from playing just a few moments just there. But if I'm practicing, for example, between the D chord to the G chord, I don't actually have to press down at all. I just need to touch the string and then touch the strings where they need to be on the G. And I'm not actually pressing down to the frets at all unless I'm strumming. Beginners often are pressing down for dear life when they're not even strumming. A pro would never do that. There's plenty of things that a pro needs to practice and plenty of things that I need to practice. Little warm-up exercises that I tend to do. But often you don't even have to do them, depending on what you're working on. You can do them silently. You can just do, if it's a left hand exercise, just practice the left hand. So Waiting on the World to Change, for example, D to B minor. Bit of an intermediate chord, this, because it is a bar chord. D major, B minor. Here I am practicing it. I'm touching the strings, but I'm not pressing down. My fingertips aren't going to hurt. And you can just drill that change. Try and get as many as you can while you're changing between them. And then when you come to strum, obviously it takes some adjustment to then get used to pressing down. But that's a great way to practice and saves your fingertips. Of course, when we're actually playing chords in a song, we're going to be strumming as well, or doing some picking. But my biggest tip for when you're strumming, that pros always do and beginners always forget it or they haven't got the principle yet, is to actually lift off of your chord hand early and arrive at the next chord when you want to arrive. Usually on beat 1, but sometimes it's on a different beat. It's not always on beat 1. And for example, what we can do here to do, say, this tricky change of D to B minor, okay? Let's do them for a bar of each. What a pro would tend to do with that is lift off on the 4 and. Like, be totally off. Play this chord. That sounds crazy, right? That sounds wrong as a beginner. You should never... This isn't a chord to play as a beginner, right? Well, it is, and pros do this all the time. Have a listen. Did you hear it? I literally, in between the D and the B minor, I'm literally hitting the open strings, but it sounds fine in context because we hear it all the time. And if that's too hard a change for you, if you want to practice this as a beginner, try just D to A major. However you want to play the A major. You can do it by lifting all your fingers off like this, or by keeping an anchor. Doesn't matter. All we want to practice is 1, 2, 3, and 4, lift, and then go to the next chord. And when we come to the harder chords, we've got that in place so we can handle those intermediate or advanced level chord changes. Now, of course, intermediate and pro level stuff, you're going to be using your first finger as a bar at some point, which means not only bar chords, but little kind of mini bar chords, like you saw me doing this kind of thing. Not playing all 5 or 6 strings all the time, just little pairs of notes. And that's certainly a big tip, like not always playing 5 strings or 6 strings all the time. That's the other thing that pros do, but we'll look at that in a future video. I wanted to make sure you're all aware of how to play the A major chord with just one finger, because it's actually how we can play any chord on guitar with one finger in standard tuning. It's pretty cool. So here is the one finger A major chord, and we can actually do that and have all 5 strings that we would have ringing out in the normal A major chord ringing out. Now that involves quite a kink of that first finger, if I get the angle right on the camera. That's what it looks like. It's really quite a kink, but it's actually quite comfortable when you get used to it. You can get used to it by just holding it flat down, kind of barring fret 2 on strings 1 to 4. It's kind of the Beatles A6 chord. It's how all the early Beatles songs end. But if you can do that at all, what you're preparing yourself for is kind of working towards being able to play any chord with one finger. And when I played the John Mayer thing earlier, I was playing a D chord just like this, which is just the A chord moved up to fret 7. And I'm also using that same technique to do some of the lead fills, because just using one finger, it frees up that third finger and the other fingers to do more stuff. Something that pros would do, that beginners, we tend to be using up all our fingers on the chords. So that's certainly something that we want to get used to. That one finger, A bar chord, becomes a gateway to that. Now I want to talk about this thumb over the top, which we would even do, or encourage, as an open way of playing many of our open chords. So D major, A major, anything where we don't want to hear string 6, we tend to sit that thumb on the top and mute it. Something that is only comfortable if our fingers are on an angle, if our fingers are right on the tips, and we have good positioning. Then it's really comfortable on most acoustic guitars, perhaps a bit of a struggle on nylon string guitars, which have a very thicker neck. But most acoustics, this is pretty comfortable. And then it's something we can also do on how we can play any chord higher up the neck. This is still our D major chord. This is at 10th, 11th and 12th fret, muting string 5 and the thumb holding down string 6. So that's a D major chord at the open. So therefore we can play the D major chord at the open position, D major shape, muting with string 6, one finger all at the 7th fret, and then at kind of an E bar chord shape, but we're only using 1, 2, 3, and then the thumb. Those 5 things can move your playing forward with a bit of time and a bit of practice from playing just open chords and bar chords in kind of the first few frets of the guitar to playing them higher up and getting different voicings and adding little embellishments, which we will look at in a future video. If this is something you're into, let me know if you like this in the comments below. I'll leave a link on screen now to my tutorial for Waiting on the World to Change. Includes all the solos and things like that. And I hope to see you again in another Andy Guitar lesson.